Welcome everyone. TK was a FEMBA graduate, 96.
Full-time.
Full-time, okay. Full-time, 96. He has done many things, but we are going to hear today about a couple of very important things he has done. He's an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. But more than entrepreneurship, I'm really excited to hear about this big vision he has about sort of looking at food, looking at what's the future going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. So thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. You want to?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So as way of introduction, I'm sure everyone wants to know the story behind Veggie Grill and the Inception. I'm sure there's a lot floating around about, but we'd love your story.
Sure. So good to be here. Good to see everybody. So I guess it was 20 years ago that I was sitting in those chairs. When I was here, I actually started an e-commerce development business as I was coming out of business school in the mid-90s. And so I was an internet web 1.0 entrepreneur. And so those were pretty formative times for the whole internet sector. And so we were on the ground floor and had a successful business and had a successful exit at the end of 1999, and or not a sale. I sold a piece of my ownership at the end of '99, but kept running the company, and then sold out completely in 2004. And so that's when I had a chance to step back and decide what I wanted to do for the next phase of my business career, and so at the time, I started thinking about reading a little bit about the health and wellness state of the United States and the lack thereof. It just was starting to become talked about more prevalently in the press. Obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and the dependence on pharmaceuticals and drugs for treating these diseases. And so I just felt there had to be a better way, and the country was going down the wrong direction. And so I kind of set out on with a goal of trying to start a business that would help move the country in the right direction. And one thing led to another, and I was just looking at a lot of different areas within that general premise and idea. And I started getting focused on the fact that there just wasn't any delicious, convenient, healthy dining options. And it seemed like a real need and an unmet need. And so I decided to do more homework on that. And so as a non-restaurateur, it was a pretty big kind of pie-in-the-sky idea to try and develop a concept like this. But I looked at it top-down first. I used some of my business school planning frameworks and did some market research. And at that time, Super Size Me had recently come out, Fast Food Nation. Some surveys had come out that 75% of consumers weren't happy with their fast food choices. The organic foods business was really starting to hit its growth trajectory, growing 20% year over year, and Whole Foods leading the way. And so based on that top-down research, determined, hey, it's not just me, there is a real pent-up demand for better quality, convenient food. So that was kind of the first step. But now, zero restaurant background or experience, didn't quite know what to do next, so I decided, I'm just going to visit every healthy restaurant I could find. Does it exist? Can it exist? What's it look like? So real bottom-up, grassroots research, and back then City Search had a list of healthy restaurants, and so I went to every one of those restaurants, drove all around, and by doing that, I ended up at a few vegetarian restaurants. And I wasn't vegetarian at the time. I was just more of a standard health-conscious eater. And so I found some of these vegetarian restaurants that were kind of out of the way, real niche kind of hidden behind the bushes, you know, no lighting on their signage. But I had a few meals at these restaurants that were really surprising. I was like, wow, who knew that vegetarian and plant-based food could taste this satisfying and be this hearty and flavorful? And so that was kind of a light bulb. I was like, well, you know, maybe this is a solution to that unmet need that I'm trying to fill. And so then I went back and did some more research. Said, okay, let me really understand what are the benefits of a plant-based or vegetarian diet. And so I really looked at some of the studies that I dug into it, looked at some of the studies that were coming out. The American Dietetic Association had just come out with a study and a statement, and American Heart Association and the Cancer Society were all starting to show or come out with these studies and endorsing these studies that showed that a plant-based diet or plant-centric diet reduces your risk of a lot of these chronic diseases. And a book called The China Study had just come out, and so I read that, and through the course of this research I decided, well, I should try this myself. So I became a plant-based eater, and based on that it really worked for me. I lost 20 pounds. My cholesterol went from 204 to 140, and I just felt very energetic, and so I became convinced that, hey, this type of eating really has a lot of benefits. And then you learn more about the environmental side of it and the factory farming ethical side of it, and really became passionate that, hey, it would be very valuable to society as a whole to create a restaurant concept that could show people how delicious plant-based foods could be in a convenient, approachable format. So that was kind of how that passion and vision developed. Probably the third light bulb was took a lot of friends to some of these out-of-the-way vegetarian restaurants, had them try the food, say, hey, am I kidding myself? Does this food actually taste good? Yeah, you know, would you eat it? And the feedback that I universally got was, hey, you know, hey, this does taste great. But, you know, it feels like I have to, first of all, I'd never find this place, and then two, feel like I have to be a vegetarian to come in here and eat and sign a petition, and I just don't feel comfortable, and I just wouldn't come in here if it wasn't for you, because it's just not very comfortable. And that was really the third light bulb. It's like, hey, if we could take this type of food that's really flavorful, is healthful, and put and can be made in a convenient format, and package it in a fun, friendly, approachable way, and really, do what Whole Foods did for the natural and organic grocery market, which is they took it from the Birkenstock hippie crowd to the mainstream health-conscious crowd. We set out and became very excited and passionate about the vision to do that for the vegetarian restaurant world. And so that was the vision for Veggie Grill.
That's really fascinating. And so you have a list of recommended restaurants that you've eaten at all over the country also?
Oh, yeah.
Great. I'm really curious because when you started Veggie Grill, I'm sure the concept of plant-based was very new and not very common, and the idea of something that had no meat ingredients at all. Did you have a lot of naysayers in the sidelines, and how did you forge ahead with your idea and your passion despite critics in the sidelines?
Yeah, so I had a lot of naysayers. Yeah. So, you know, really, if you step back and look at it, I'd sold out of my technology business. I'd been in technology my whole career, and then within 6 months, I had become a vegan, right? You try not to use that word because it's a little polarizing, but plant-based eating, vegan, I use those interchangeably. So I'd become a vegan within 6 months, and then decided I want to start a vegan restaurant chain. Right, so a lot of my friends and family, you know, didn't think it was a great idea. You know, I remember my wife saying that maybe I should stick to technology. And it was kind of a crazy idea. I mean, to think about that at that level. But we were very passionate. I had a partner who I was working with on it, and I think it was very helpful because I remember saying to him at one point, hey, I'm glad you believe in this because nobody else does, and at least I know you believe in it, and you know I believe in it, so at least there's two people who believe that this thing could work. And then luckily we were able to recruit the right people on the restaurant side to execute on the food, and then we spent all of our energy really focusing on trying to come up with the right brand and menu approach and platform to really cross over from that niche vegan vegetarian market to the mainstream. But yeah, there was a lot of naysayers, and luckily we had the passion and belief and thought it really would meet that need that we were trying to meet.
Right.
And I will throw out that, that whole, we had no idea. Like, we were just crossing our fingers hoping. Like, we were definitely, our biggest fear was, could we get over this vegan vegetarian stereotype? Mm-hmm. Could we get people who weren't vegan and vegetarian to come in the door? And we did a lot of research, a lot of kind of focus, I wouldn't call them focus groups, but got a lot of feedback from friends and family based on the menu we were developing and the branding and the name and the logo and everything, so that to try and help make sure that we could get over that barrier. And then we did all that. We came up with the logo, the menu, the branding, the ambiance, and then we were able to get a lease and build it out. And you put a lot of money into building out a restaurant, and that's why a lot of restaurants fail, because you put a lot of capital in and you run out, and then you hope, then you open the doors, you cross your fingers, and you hope people come in. And that's kind of, luckily they did come in, they tried it, and the food really did fill that need. And luckily, our instincts were right, and it did resonate with people.
That's a great segue, actually. I'm sure there's a lot of budding entrepreneurs that are curious about the same thing, which is, how did you raise money for your ventures, not just Veggie Grill, but all of your ventures? And I believe Veggie Grill, you had sort of strategic slow growth, like you wanted a moderate growth at the beginning, and why did you choose that? And sort of speak a little bit to financing.
Sure. So my first business, which was it was a professional services, IT-based business model focused on e-commerce, new e-commerce-based internet technologies that were just coming to market in the mid to late 90s. Totally bootstrapped that. I was working with a partner, and we put in our own capital, very little, modestly, and just started going out and marketing our services, and got one client, and then we developed a site and did everything, from sales, marketing, development, everything, right? Collections, so classic bootstrap story. And as we got more clients, at a certain point, we were able to hire some other programmers to help us develop the sites. And as we got more clients, we were able to build a business based on revenue, and got to a certain scale where then we were able to bring on outside financing. The Veggie Grill was really the opposite, right? But luckily, one, because the restaurant business is very capital intensive. To get a decent sized restaurant open from scratch takes $1 million, right? And yeah, you could do it for less, but you're going to have to cut a lot of corners and get lucky. But it takes a lot, and then again, the hard part about the restaurant business is you put all that money in, and then you open the doors and hope that it works. Whereas in the professional services business and tech, a lot of different tech businesses, you try one thing, throw it out there, that doesn't work, okay, you reformulate it, throw it out again, you can do all this iterative stuff. In the restaurant business, you get one chance to make a first impression, and word of mouth travels quickly. You don't have time to rejigger and re-architect and do all that stuff. So it's a different model. I think consumer packaged goods, similar as well. You got to really be ready for launch before you launch. And so luckily we had the capital from, I had the capital from my first business sale, and my partner had capital from his prior business to have the ability to put in the amount of capital it takes to start a restaurant concept, and also recruit some key people who could come in and help us deliver on the restaurant side of it. and they worked initially for some sweat equity, but then we were putting in all the capital to support the business. So yeah, it's, that was a different, and then luckily we got it up, it was running, it was proved. Once we had a proven concept, that was our prototype, right. Then we were able to raise money to grow the chain from friends and family.
Right, interesting. And so do you have sort of advice about that? Because I feel like, lately the focus always tends to be raise funding rounds for a new business concept, and so the number of businesses that are bootstrapped maybe bootstrapping is not something that people think about as their first business venture. And do you have any kind of advice for the budding entrepreneurs in the room about that?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, you do as much as you can on your own, bootstrapped. I mean, sometimes you've got a business that can only go so far bootstrapped. You need to get investors, but you're going to have a better chance of getting investors, and you're going to be better prepared for those investors and better prepared to execute if you've done everything within your power with limited resources to move that concept forward. The minimum viable product is a term you hear in the tech world. Like our minimum viable product in the restaurant world was a test menu. We started testing with all these people before we actually had to build out a restaurant. I think generally that's what I think works. And unless you're just so brilliant, you can come up with this great idea and that it's the right idea right up front. And there's people who do that, and then they get that funded. But usually it takes a decent amount of bootstrapping before you're ready for the big leagues.
So eventually I'll open it up to questions, but I'd like to shift focus a little bit and learn a little bit more about you in terms of, what was your earliest inkling that you might be an entrepreneur, that you wanted to branch out on your own, and how did you cultivate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was here at Anderson, I was a aspiring entrepreneur. I hadn't been an entrepreneur, and so I came and listened to a lot of different entrepreneurs who came on campus and talked about their stories, and I've heard a lot of stories, and I think there's no one story. Like my parents, my dad was an engineer, but as I was, and I went into engineering because seemed like the right thing for me, but as I was on the engineering side, I kind of realized I really wanted to move more on the business side. And then I developed, I think, a certain point of view that I really wanted to control my own destiny, and really, I was ready to put in a lot of work and wanted to have the final say on what I was going to, put all my effort towards and have be able to reap the rewards of that work. And so I think that's what led me to really wanting to start my own business. I also looked at it as the ultimate business challenge, and it's not for everybody. I mean, you have to make a lot of sacrifices, and but I was just I had enough desire, and my personal window was open, and so I just decided that's what I was going to do.
We've had a few events lately on campus that talk about the importance of remembering where you came from and being true to who you are in order to be successful in business or any venture, whether it's your own or climbing the corporate ladder. What is it about your background, who you were, who you are, that made you who you are today, where you came from?
Oh, good question. So I definitely, you have to be, I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, at least from my experience and a lot of the experiences I've seen, it has to be a business that's true to who you are, because there's so much work you have to put into it, and there's so many sacrifices without guaranteed returns, that it's something you have to be really, really passionate about and really believe in, to the point where you're willing to fail, because a lot of things do fail, and you're so passionate about this idea and this concept and the need for it in the world that you want to go for it. And so to me, if you don't have that level of passion and desire for what you're doing, I think your chances of not being able to stick it out are much higher. And I think that kind of defines a lot of what an entrepreneur is because I feel lucky that I found that. I found it first with the internet. I had a technology background, and I became so fascinated with the internet and what it could do, and then my ability to help people leverage the internet and get involved in these exciting new business transformations. That was a real passion that fit within my own skill sets, and so I was lucky to find that. And then with Veggie Grill, same thing. It was just, I did put myself out there. I started doing some of the research, and then that research led me to this real passion and I've done other research that hasn't led me to that. And so I think part of, I guess there's different entrepreneurial paths, but for me, it's kind of going down a little bit of a path until you get to that thing that you're so passionate about that you're willing to commit everything in your power to create. And
so could I just relate
Yeah.
to that point? So is there a right age for it? I mean, I'm also worried about risk.
Sure.
So, I'm a finance guy, so I always worry about, we also hear these things that, only 5 out of 100 businesses succeed, and we have MBA students who have $100,000 in debt. So what do you advise a young person who has $100,000 in debt? What kind of freedom should they have? What kind of, where should they be so that they can say, I'm willing to risk another 3 to 5 years with a 95% probability of failure?
Sure. So I think there's some real pragmatic steps you need to, or analysis you need to undertake in terms of where you are personally.
Okay, so tell us more about that.
So I think I was, when I was at Anderson, early on I was tempted to follow a lot of my peers into consulting. And I think consulting was probably the easiest fit for me, but there's investment banking, and so early on it seemed like, well, maybe I should just do that and just go down that path.
Yeah.
And I even had an opportunity to go into venture capital and pursue that path. But for me, I give myself credit. I did my own personal analysis and said, what, right now the window of opportunity for me is wide open. I'm young, I'm single, I wasn't in debt.
So young, single, not in debt.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I don't do something now, like this is the time, right? And so, starting Veggie Grill, that was a little more. That was risky. At that point I had a house and had a family, and so I had to go use some of my home equity line to get Veggie Grill started. And so the downside of Veggie Grill not working was can't live in Manhattan Beach anymore, right? But I was ready for that, right? So I pragmatically said, okay, well, our first location was in Irvine. So first time coming out of business school, worst case was, well, I just go get a job, right? No big deal. Maybe I'm turning down some great opportunity that won't come back, but probably not. Probably I could do whatever I want to do, and then that doesn't work, go try and find a job. That one was a lot easier. Second time, Veggie Grill, I had tasted entrepreneurship, and I think, I wanted, controlling your own destiny. It's hard. You kind of make yourself a little unemployable. So I think I was kind of, but I was looking at opportunities, and I was thinking about, well, maybe I should go try and find a job, with an early stage company, leveraging all of the early stage technology, business building background I had gone through, and that path probably would have worked, and I probably would have. But as I discovered the passion I had towards creating Veggie Grill, I did the analysis, and our first location was in Irvine. And I said, worst case, I'm going to have to sell the house, I'm going to have to go live in Irvine, and I have to work in the restaurant every day, right? And, if you're willing to live with that worst case, then you can go for it. Mm-hmm. But you need to, you should understand what that worst case is, and decide if that's worth it given the upside.
Well, and so you mentioned that venture capital was one avenue that you were pursuing, and now sort of coming back full circle, you've co-founded your own venture fund. So what are you hoping that your venture fund that focuses on plant-based businesses will do to the sector?
Yeah, well, again, it's kind of pursuing a passion. We've been on the ground floor of this plant-based natural products movement for the last 10 years, and we have a belief that awareness and demand and the need for re-architecting our food supply system from being animal-centric to plant-centric is a real need, and people are becoming aware of it, and there's a lot of great entrepreneurs creating great products. And I use the term plant-centric because I don't promote everybody needs to be vegan or vegetarian, but I do think the studies out there are showing that the animal-centric food supply chain we have right now is just not good for our environment and not good for our health. And mostly plants or plant-centric is kind of a path towards a sustainable future.
But we seem to seek it, right? Even the veggie food, all these organizations are saying, "Oh, this tastes just like a hamburger."
Sure. Yeah.
So where is that going? I mean, is that evolutionary that we all seek the little? Yeah. Or is it thing is just a habitual thing?
I think it's there's a certain satiety you get from concentrated protein, right?
Yeah.
And so once we there's probably some biological aspect to it, that back when we were cavemen, we were hunters and gatherers, and we gathered a lot of our food, but every now and then we were able to hunt a little bit, and that gave us so much, that satiety held us over longer, right? And once we felt that, and just like with sugar, and our capitalistic society and system just made it so much easier and cheaper to keep getting that, that we just created a system that wasn't good for us, right? We have so much cheap, easy access to saturated fat and cholesterol, which is the negative parts of meat and dairy, and we have so much easy access to processed added sugar, right? But what's happening now is capitalism, I think, is hopefully on the path to helping to save us. Right? Because now, based on this demand, it's all about consumer demand, which stems from, I think, is starting to stem from awareness. People are now demanding food that's better for them because we see the results of it. 50% of the country is going to die from heart disease and cancer, right? And that's a direct relationship to the food we're eating, and it's been proven now through scientific studies. So that's kind of a way to answer your question and your question. That hey, that's the need. That's why we started this this fund, because we think there's a real opportunity, capitalistic opportunity, based on the awareness and demand for better for you food, and we think plant-centric businesses are going to lead us towards the future, and we think we have the ability to add value to these companies based on our experience growing brands in the sector, and being entrepreneurs ourselves. And so we decided to raise a fund to identify what we think are the ones that can break through, and help them break through.
Do you think California is a great place for plant-based, plant-based businesses and food and sort of healthy eating. As you expand, you think about Veggie Girls expansion plans, do you actually see this permeating to, maybe not? Is it a saturated market in the big cities? Do you ever see this kind of movement moving to sort of the inner areas of America? And
yeah, good question. I think it's like any kind of progressive movement. It's going to take some time to go from the metropolitan urban areas into the more rural areas. Whole Foods is kind of one of the leading indicators for us. Whole Foods, they have 400 plus locations across the country, but they're not in every state and they're not in every region. They're in the regions that have a high density of college-educated people who are willing to pay a little bit more and want to take care of themselves, and that awareness. There's not enough density of that awareness in every market for them to exist in every market right now. But hopefully, there is a real demand. You know, a lot of Costco, Walmart are now doing organic and natural, so there's a good indicator that the demand is flowing into these less metropolitan areas. So
where are we in terms of pricing? Is plant-based food that tastes just as good as chicken? Is it less expensive, more expensive?
yeah, unfortunately, right now it's still more expensive.
And
that
is it
has-
a scale issue, or
It's scale-
what are your simulations telling you that if it were, let's say, very common, if everybody was demanding it, would the price actually come
yes,
down?
Yes, so that is part of the optimism for the future. Another part of it that hopefully will change is government subsidies. They subsidize all of that feed that gets fed to the cattle, right?
But they don't subsidize anything in that. Right.
So it makes the cost of producing
So
meat cheaper.
without subsidy, are your cost numbers telling you that producing plant-based
Yeah.
food just as cost-effective as it is?
Once the demand is created and the food system is re-architected to deliver those plant-based products.
So it might be useful to populate this in an area where people are used to vegetarian food, like India, right? Because then you get a huge mass adoption right off the bat, and then check it out whether the economies are working or not. But
It's a good
not-
thought. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, there's the consumer side of this, the capitalistic market side of it. But yeah, no, it's yeah, certainly there's some merit.
yeah, no, when I go to
creating-
India, I'd only eat vegetarian food because it's so good, you know.
Yeah.
When I'm here,
Yeah.
when I get to Veggie Grill, I go, but most of the places I can't see Veggie Grill.
So to ask, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think I know the answer to this question, but what's the cost difference in India, a vegetarian meal versus a meat-based meal? Is it more expensive?
No, I think the vegetarian meals are cheaper.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going. Like,
Yeah.
we've in our system here in the U.S., we advanced so much to meet consumer demand for concentrated protein that we've made it cheaper to create meat.
Yeah.
India didn't have that high level of demand and that sophisticated capitalistic infrastructure to create that efficiency for meat there. And so now we need to re-architect it
So
here.
maybe you need somebody like an Amazon or somebody like Jeff Bezos who say, I'm willing to burn billions of dollars to create this demand, and then we will get there,
Sure.
rather than relying on governments, because
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some great socially based investors that are helping to fund a lot of innovations in this space. Bill Gates being one of them. The Gates Foundation are big investors in a lot of these plant-based innovative companies like Beyond Meat and Hampton Creek. The richest man in Hong Kong has an investment fund. He's a vegan and he's focused on funding a lot of these innovative companies. Are really diving into the details of plant-based properties and how to replicate the taste and texture of meat with plants. Because I think they've, that thesis, which is, I think, a valid, there's a lot of different ways this needle's going to move forward. One clear way is to give people the same taste and enjoyment that they get from meat without the cows involved. And there's a lot of innovative, Impossible Foods is another company that's close, and they're being funded not by governments. They're being funded by these entrepreneurs, a lot of them from the tech sector, who made a lot of money, and now we're trying to put it towards initiatives that are going to move help us create a sustainable future.
Right, but I'll stop after this. But why are these two separate? That's the part I don't understand. So there's Impossible Meat and Impossible Foods, which are saying we'll create something that looks just like a hamburger. You're not going that way. You're saying vegetarian food, we can just create it to be tasty in its own right.
We're doing both.
You're doing both.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you are doing the hybrid thing.
Yeah, if you go to Veggie Grill, you'll see both. You'll see a buffalo chicken sandwich.
Yeah,
You'll see
that's true.
all
That's
hail
true,
kale
yeah.
salad. So depending on where you are on that spectrum, and same thing with our fund. We have a few what we call food tech investments, but then we also have companies that are just making plant-based ingredients taste great and brand them in the right way and distribute them in the right way.
So then do you, as part of Veggie Grill and also the companies that you're starting to support and fund through your venture, how much is the consumer education piece something that you're interested in or you hope that the companies that you support will invest in and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's a real need for education, but it's expensive. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to educate people who aren't out there trying to educate themselves. Mm-hmm. So that part is a challenge. I've thought about that. You know, my next business venture after this fund may be focused on that because there is a real need for it. Right. But it's a big challenge too. So right now what's happening is...
So I don't believe in that thing, education piece, which is, it doesn't make business sense. I think it's very hard to make. The idea is really to create so that you don't need to educate people. It sort of comes naturally to you. You sort of pass by Veggie Grill and the smell is so good that you go in and
But you might be turned off by the fact that there's no meat available. If you know.
Yeah, that's true.
It's interesting. Yeah.
But I generally agree with the real solution because capitalism has a lot of great qualities, right? And it's based on self-interest, right? Right? So if you make this type of food that's better for sustainability, one, there's the self-interest of your health. So that's starting to happen. So that part is part of the solution, where awareness of the fact that here is the optimal way to eat if you want to reduce your chance of heart disease and cancer and diabetes.
Yeah, the China study is fascinating, by the way. If you haven't looked into it, it's really fascinating.
So that part, is, China study is a great book. That part is happening. And then the other part is that you don't have to make any sacrifices from taste and enjoyment, right? And so both of those things hopefully are going to lead this market forward.
Maybe airlines is a good place. Pick an airline which will only serve plant-based food. So the people are forced to eat. That food is crappy anyway. People will try it and then they'll say, oh my God, this is so good.
That's a good idea. That actually,
shall we open it up to questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for being here, TK. You have a great experience to share with us. As an aspiring restaurant entrepreneur who is young, single, and not in debt, do you have any mistakes that you made early on when you were scaling your growth? Or any,
you're not talking about mistake as in being sort of single and those kind of things.
Okay. Yeah, not that kind of stuff. But any things you wish you knew, in your first couple restaurants that you know now?
One thing I think I'm very, very grateful we did was bring on a good restaurant partner who had worked in restaurants for years, because to learn the ins and outs of the restaurant business, which is at the end of the day, a blue-collar business, it's a lot of work, and I'm not sure, unless you grew up in it, you probably want somebody who's been in it for a long time to help you, because there's a lot of ways to fail around operational execution.
How did you find it?
That was part of just going out and visiting these restaurants and finding a restaurant that we thought was closest to what we wanted to create, and then talking to the owner of that restaurant or owners, and then finding out that they were trying to split apart, and then working out a deal with one of them to come be one of our partners. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship to just finding the right partner. Yep.
Yep.
Do you know what percentage of the Veggie Grill customers are vegan, vegetarian, and what percentage are meat eaters who just enjoy the occasional vegetarian meal? And, and so how much of the business is dependent on that second group to keep the business going?
Yeah, so the business is totally dependent on the second group. It's about, there's just not enough vegans and vegetarians in markets to make a restaurant concept work, because you need to get enough volume to pay for your rent. It might work online and in Whole Foods, where you don't have to spend all this money getting a location up and running. For a restaurant, so to answer your question, probably based on studies we've done, 30% of our guests are vegan, vegetarian, 70% are not. And so it's all about giving them, we're not here to tell people they should be vegan or vegetarian. We're here to show people how delicious plant-based foods can be, and hopefully get them to increase their consumption of plant-based foods, which is good for everybody.
How about getting like a chef, a famous chef, to like, you know, what is this dirty laundry? What is that thing in San Francisco? What is it called? The French laundry, not the dirty laundry. Sorry. Get him to say that I'm only going to do for a year just vegetarian-based food, and that will get a lot of attention, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people getting on the bandwagon. Arnold Schwarzenegger just a couple months ago said, eat more plants, it's good for the environment. Bill Gates is on the bandwagon, Richard Branson's on the bandwagon. A lot of celebrities like Beyonce and Jay-Z, and so it's happening. There's a movement that's happening, and especially in the millennial crowd. So, because, you know, there's another part of this, which is habits, right? Is like Gen X and baby boomers, you know, for most people, it's just too late in their habit formation cycle to change, right? They're just so used to eating, meat and dairy three times a day, 7 days a week, that it's, you know, some people could do it. I did it, right? But a lot of people it's just not in their psyche. It would be almost like telling me to run a marathon. Yeah, I could probably do it, but the level of effort to get there would take a long time, and I'm not up for it. But what's happening is this younger generation is really growing up with awareness of food, where it's come from, what the impacts are, and they're changing their approach to eating, and it's at a time where there's a lot better products out there to make it easier.
Do it with school lunches.
Yeah, so it's happening. Yeah, it's happening. It's just going to take a little while.
You talked about having not only government subsidies come in, but also more widespread demand kind of take hold in the niche industry that you're in. But in a low-margin business like restaurants, in the meantime, how are you keeping costs low while still producing high-quality, fresh ingredients and making it tasty and all that?
Yeah.
He said low-margin business. Is that true or no?
Well, it's a penny margin business. Let's say that. He's right in the fact that if you do it right, you create good margins. These companies like Chipotle and McDonald's aren't growing without good, healthy restaurant-level profits that support their growth. So that probably was an incorrect statement, but the correct statement was every penny counts when you're trying to create that viable business margin that allows you to grow. And that's kind of part of my advice over there, is you got to have people on board who know how to do that, because there's so many little aspects of managing your labor costs, and that's a big issue now. And then you got to manage your food costs, and then you got to manage your real estate and operational costs, and you got to grind it out. Like every penny counts. So you got to have people who know how to do that. Learning on the fly is probably not a good way to go.
This question there.
Just wondering, you were talking about on one side you're seeing more interest from the general population, but as an organization, as you see more competitors enter the space since you founded, how is it that you think about focusing on positioning yourself and differentiating?
Sure. Yeah, it's that's the other part about the food business and the restaurant business. Very competitive. Right?
But it's probably good for you, for this movement, is it not? If there are a lot of people coming up with vegetarian thing, then it takes care of the education issue.
It does. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So you got to stay on your game in the restaurant business. You got to continue to deliver great food and a great experience that people see it as great and something that they're going to keep coming back to, even though they can go to Tender Greens and Lemonade and these other places and get kind of plant-based meals, even though they're not vegan restaurants. Let's call it they're healthier meals, right? Because we're for that 70% of the market that isn't vegan or vegetarian, we're the healthier meal. And there's a lot more healthier meal options out there, so we just have to keep innovating on our menu and deliver with great service. And that goes for any food service concept. Like look at Starbucks and McDonald's. They don't lack for a ton of competition, but they just are so good at executing, and they've got enough of a differentiator that they can continue to be very successful, and that's what we need to do at Veggie Grill as we grow.
Yeah, thanks for coming today. You mentioned that you were trying to appeal, to both meat eaters and plant-based eaters with Veggie Grill. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about like the marketing strategy of Veggie Grill and maybe why you incorporate the word veggie into the name?
Sure. Yeah, that was. when we first started out, we, based on our experiences, thought the food was pretty good. The whole goal was, how do we get people to come in and try it? How do we market veggie food to non-vegetarians? And we decided to call it Veggie Grill because we didn't want to fool people. People come in. We didn't want people to come in, think they were going to have meat, and then walk out, right? So we kind of made that initial decision. So we decided to telegraph the fact that it was vegetarian. But then after that, we decided to do everything we could to emphasize enjoyment, delicious food, and that's where we got grill. Grill has more of that excitement and has a little bit of meat connotation to it. And then when you walk into our restaurants, you see pictures of great food, and we did a lot of food sampling early on, just allowing people to try the food. And what we've learned over the years, I think we were smart early on, where we said, this is all about grassroots, word of mouth. We need people who are open enough to try it, to come in, try it, enjoy it enough that they're going to tell their friends and bring their friends in. Because we've learned that you can't market to people who aren't already what we call veggie positive. People who are inclined to want a veggie focused meal. So the guy who's looking for his Jack in the Box burger, it just doesn't make sense for us to try and market to him. It's just too hard, right? And, and that goes back to classic marketing consumer segmentation. That we got to really understand especially as you grow and you go into these other markets, who our consumer is, and then make sure we hone in our messaging towards that, because you can't be everything to everybody. And so our target demo are skew slightly more educated, people who care about their food, and we do all our marketing now towards that demographic. And if we get other people along the way, great, but you got to pick and choose.
It's a good idea to go for women because they make all the decisions about where to eat anyway, and men just...
Yeah, and there's other factors too. Yeah, they're smarter. Just kidding.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Sure.
I'm interested in your growth strategy. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you haven't franchised as it stands.
Correct.
So can you talk through that decision and any plans for the future?
Sure. That's a very much a business decision, a strategy of. Subway, for example, is the most successful franchisee out there. It's very easy to take a couple pieces of meat and veggie, throw them on a bun, and get them out. You don't need a kitchen. You don't need a lot of training. To deliver a veggie grill experience involves a lot more training in the back of the house. We're making our marinades and sauces from scratch every day, and to deliver that is much harder. And so that makes franchising a much more thought. It would need to be a much bigger decision, because we'd have to invest in training franchisees, picking the right franchisees who could deliver on that experience and train them and manage them. And a few people have done it. Panera Bread has a franchise system, but Chipotle's pretty predominantly corporately owned. Starbucks, even though it's just coffee, is corporately owned. But then there's other coffee shops that are franchised. Pinkberry's franchised. All you're doing is, really pulling the handle of a yogurt machine, and so that's there you're rushing for market space. You're rushing for market penetration because there's a lot of competitors, and so.
But you could do both, though, right? You could have the veggie grill, sort of this specialized thing going, but sort of a simpler version of just giving the
Sure.
technology to somebody else, because that will create the demand for vegetarian food.
Sure.
And education, and they will come to you for like really delicious meal.
Yes.
Right? Is that?
Well, I think the fact that a lot of people don't think about is creating a good franchise system is a big investment to be able to train, manage, and support franchisees. And if you're going to do that, then you need to put probably all your effort and focus on that.
Yeah.
If you're going to do corporately owned, then you need to put all your effort on how do you create your own team and structure and strategy. To do them both, especially at your earlier stages of growth,
But
is really
somebody
hard.
was to approach you as a partnership. So I'm getting old now, and my children are going to college. So I'm thinking about entrepreneurship. I say, okay, TK, I'm going to take this idea of franchising and do a separate thing. You just give me the technology, the ingredients. Would you be open to that? No, I don't mean I personally.
Sure.
But
Where we would do it for us, Veggie Grill, is internationally. Because we know there's people who run restaurant concepts in other countries that know a lot more about running those concepts in other countries, and we could train them on what we're doing and be better to have them do it. Whereas to train you on how to do it in New York versus us doing it ourselves, we're probably going to have a better chance of doing it ourselves and being successful than
no, I
training
meant
you.
a completely different idea. We use your veggie ideas, but it doesn't look like Veggie Grill. It looks like a Subway. Okay. All right.
So to answer your question, I would do that myself. I wouldn't do that.
Do it yourself.
I wouldn't do it at Veggie Grill because we got enough to worry about at Veggie Grill.
I was wondering with this, could you talk a little bit about vendor management and managing the supply chain for plant-based restaurant? Obviously, is the alternative and finding maybe the right vendors.
It's just part of the executional details. You got to go out and luckily we came to market and then you get a time where there were more vendors available. Whole Foods deserves credit for that because they created a natural product supply chain and then they created demand for more vegetarian products and so suppliers started coming to market. We made some of our kind of meat alternatives when we first started, but then suppliers came to market. So it's just our job to stay on top of all the latest and greatest suppliers and pick the ones we think are going to help us develop the best menu and at the right cost.
As you're building your brand, have you considered going into supermarket channels as a prepared food category? If so, why? If not?
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about actually doing a prepared, prepackaged food. My general analysis on that is it's a way to leverage your brand, not build your brand. Mm-hmm. So I think the companies that have done a great job at it have already had a brand, and then they leveraged it into the channel. They usually licensed it to a consumer packaged goods company like a Kraft. I think Kraft early on partnered with Starbucks and Ben & Jerry's and companies like that. They usually license and partner, but it's after they've developed a brand on a national basis. So we're not ready for that. But maybe at some point when we have a national brand and we think there's enough equity there that we can leverage it in the right way, and you have to do it in the right way where it's delivering the quality and the promise of your brand. Because that's another challenge with doing frozen food.
So how many Veggie Grills already?
29.
29. Awesome.
In how many states?
3 states. West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington.
And so is the demand for food products different in each of the states? Does the consumer ask for something a little bit different?
Our menu items are the same. It's a good question. Consumers are definitely a little, I mean, it's just different regions have different overall psychographics, so to speak. And so maybe slightly different marketing approaches work in different areas. But the concept of it itself is the same. Yep.
Did we have a question back there?
I was wondering about institutional food, universities, hospitals. I mean, it seems like when you turn around in those environments, there was sort of a dearth of healthier.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an opportunity for us. We're talking to how that usually works is there's large food service companies that get the contracts to run the operations within those organizations, and so we've talked to some of those companies, and so I think hopefully you will see Veggie Grills in those formats in the next few years.
I have one last question in terms of, since this is a high impact tea, what do you see the role of purpose and cause in business? And can you speak to maybe what Veggie Grill does towards that?
Yeah. So I think every business that has created long-term impact has a purpose that they stay true to. Apple on the technology side, Facebook on the social side. And the nice thing about creating a business like Veggie Grill or another business that has a social impact is it's very easy to get people to rally around your cause, your team members. And so that's an inherent benefit of doing something that you believe is better for the world and your employees and team members and partners believe. You can get people to rally around it. Now, at the end of the day, you need to have a product that can stand on its own from a value proposition standpoint. They're not going to come into Veggie Grill just because it's better for the world. It's got to taste great and be delicious and at the right price point and convenient and good. So you got to have all of that. But to execute on all of that, if you have a strong purpose and cause that your team members rally around to help you deliver on that, it's a benefit. And you see it with a lot of companies these days, especially in the natural food space. And we work with a lot of them. Yep.